トゥルフ TRPG 始めますか。
新クトゥルフ神話 TRPG を
クトゥルフ神話 TRPG
新クトゥルフ神話 TRPG
新クトゥルフ神話 TRPG ガシャンやろう
Shin Cthulhu Shinwa TRPG is one of Japan's favorite games, part of the longer-running Cthulhu no Yobigaway franchise that has been ongoing since 1986. Since its rise to popularity, its sorry decline in the late 90s, then a resurgence in 2004, and then a massive boom as early as 2019, where it has, throughout its entire run, outsold all other games in its genre in sales combined. However, the game is not a console game, PC game, arcade game, or even a mobile game. Shin Cthulhu Shinwa TRPG, or Call of Cthulhu, is a tabletop role-playing game. It's D&D. D&D is one of these things. It's one of these! What's Call of Cthulhu? It is a mystery horror survival game where players take on the role of investigators looking into spooky happenings. Typically, your objective is to solve the case, but each bit of knowledge that you obtain increases the risk as you go along, inviting horrors into the lives of the investigators that are either supernatural or just pure madness, usually a mix of the two. Sanity is Call of Cthulhu's trademark mechanic. Each character only has so much of it. The more you lose in one go, and over time, the greater the effects are on the character. This provides for some amazing roleplay opportunities and horror to be implemented into the game, making some truly intense and dread-inducing situations. In place of classes, Call of Cthulhu has occupations, the literal jobs that the characters have, which provide the skills they use in the investigation. It's just as valid for you to play a slimy wisecracking private eye as it is for you to play like a chef, a cat burglar, a waitress, an actor, even a scientist. All skills are valid, from academic to social to practical to many others. Often your occupation will be determined by the case and the setting. Another one of Call of Cthulhu's trademarks, which is basically Earth. Or historical Earth. Call of Cthulhu uses a variety of settings and time periods to place its cases. Most are in the 1920s at the interwar period in America, but you can also have them in World War II, modern day, Imperial Rome, medieval Europe, Victorian Britain, revolutionary France, or any historical setting that you personally have a lot of knowledge in. It is incredibly adaptable, and it's what gives Call of Cthulhu such variety in its mystery and horror. The fact that it's so adaptable to these different time periods gives you a ton of freedom. Personally, I'd love to see sourcebooks on the Islamic Golden Age, the Qing Dynasty, pre-colonial America, or any of the regions that were deep in the rise of communism at the time. Like, that's a gold mine they haven't even touched yet. Because it's horror survival, there's a massive variety of monsters and enemies that you will be facing and trying to escape. You don't find this. I mean, you can, but it's like very deadly. You get stabbed with something, you get stabbed with something. It's gonna bleed, it's gonna hurt. You get shot, you dead. Ain't no coming back from that. You see a monster that's gonna be staring at you that has cosmic knowledge beyond your comprehension, boom! There goes your mind! You ain't gonna be doing much! It's a deadly game with a lot of tension. Your objective is to survive, but to solve the case. The risk and reward aspect of the game is key. So, expect a lot of fatalities, but still expect a lot of fun. Intense and spooky gameplay, great mystery solving, huge variety in character creation, and unique settings is one of the key things of Call of Cthulhu's appeal. So why does Japan like it so much? So, Dicebreaker have already made a video about this. I'll be going into some of the specific points they bring up, but if you want a quick TLDR of the details, by all means, go watch them, then come back. Otherwise, let's continue. To talk about how Japan's scene surrounding Call of Cthulhu is so unique, we also need to talk about its localization in other countries. More by how I think it works, but this is a quick overview of what I've gathered. But damn! It's the 1980s, and America was kind of everywhere in the world. It was the Cold War, and they had risen as one of the world's #1 superpowers. That meant complicated trade deals, propaganda, 80s movie, and a ton of exports. Like a lot of them. Movies, food, cars for some reason. The car part's really important. But, importantly for this video, games. D&D's rise to popularity saw it exported throughout the world, and with that export came more TTRPGs that would also be translated, throughout the world. One of these competitors was RuneScape Quest, developed by Chaosium Inc. Call of Cthulhu by Sandy Peterson was originally a supplement for RuneQuest before becoming its own thing in production. Chaosium, the publisher, weren't as big as TSR at the time, the then publishers of D&D. Neither are they as big as Wizards of the Coast now. They do not have international branches, they do not have an expansive localization team, so all the localizing for the countries that they sent out their game to had to be done by their local publishers. Now I have to ask, do you have any idea what it's like to localize something in another language?
Oh, you just need to translate the words. How hard can it be?
No, it's way harder. There are languages that don't even have words that are directly translatable from English and vice versa. You have to do the entirely new layout of the book because a language could have different sentence structuring and thus you can't fit everything on a single paragraph. It could have different page lengths, it could have different meanings, and it could have entirely different structures. Because this was all outsourced to those companies, this also meant that they had to get local artists to do unique artwork for those editions. This is the artwork for the American edition. This is also used in a few other countries as well. Now, here's the Polish, here's the German, here's the French, and here's the upcoming Swedish one. I love these. I love seeing alternate covers of stuff. Some of these editions have unique rules specific to those editions. Each country has a very different TTRPG culture surrounding it. They have different priorities, what they enjoy more, as well as a general focus on what the game should be about. How we see it in English is very different from how people see it in Germany, Japan, China, etc. And localizations, especially ones that have been localizing the same game for a long period of time, have to cater to that, while also conveying the intended meaning of the original game. And there's the challenge of localizing. As a side note, here's the Chinese edition of Call of Cthulhu. I love the logo. It has little tentacles. It's adorable. Let's move on. This is the Japanese cover for Shin Cthulhu Fanwa TRPG. It's amazing. Published by Katakawa Corporation. Yes, that Katakawa Corporation. Japan's localization history of this game is extensive and probably warrants its own video and a ton of research when I can somehow learn Japanese. Even before its publishing, Japan already had a relationship with Lovecraft content. I advise watching this video to know more specifically about its relationship with Lovecraft content, and also this video for direct adaptations of Lovecraft's work in Japan. The point is, Japan already has a love of horror by the time that Call of Cthulhu is published. In 1983, the first box edition is published by Hobby Japan. TRPGs, or tabletop RPGs in Japan, were relatively unknown in the early 90s, but then gradually soared up in popularity. Eventually, D&D's publication in Japan would lose its translation rights, and thus be pulled from shelves, while Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu continued on. The market at the time was actually oversaturated with fantasy. There wasn't an RPG that did this sort of thing. In fact, mystery RPGs were sort of a unique niche at the time. That's why you see so many Japanese exclusive video games that are these mystery-solving horror games. It's an entire thing. Pair this with the rising intrigue in Western esotericism and spirituality, what with the occult boom going on at the time, and you have a game which is already ripe for intrigue from the get-go. Right up until the Japanese bubble burst in the 1990s, effectively, screwing over the entire economy. Businesses were shutting down around the entire nation, and it was a massive cultural punch to the gut. And thus, the tabletop scene actually began to phase out in a period known as Tabletop Fuyo no Jidai. Well, it sounds pretty cool, actually just stands for the Tabletop Winter Era. It was a period when many TTRPGs had just died out, unable to afford to sustain themselves anymore. Before this, Call of Cthulhu enjoyed a really good run. Its unique setting made it incredibly adaptable, same with its character creation and its horror. Its old editions and Japan unique adventures are collector's items now, and even subjects of nostalgia for the people who used to play them. Tasegara no Tenshi, a Japan exclusive adventure written by Jun Arisaka, was released out of love and the desire for the fans to play in modern day Japan, as most of the settings were based based in America. Ironic, considering the Secret of Japan sourcebook released in 2005, which had this optional rule in it. It had become an icon for many TTRPG nerds and otakus of the era, and there would be a new edition released in the 90s which didn't see much attention, and eventually the publishing rights would be lost. The 90s were a transformational period for a lot of TTRPGs at the time. With the advent of the World Wide Web just over the horizon, there was an increase in accessibility to the hobby. This was, however, during the rise of home console video games and the introduction of Magic the Gathering, which overtook a lot of Wizards of the Coast focus for a good period of time. This, as well as the poor reception of Wizards of the Coast's most recent edition of Dungeons & Dragons, things were adjusting to this new digital age of information, which was becoming more and more commercially accessible. New editions were being made for old games, as well as the introduction of new ones, including, at the time, Cult Divinity, as well as Vampire the Masquerade, which brought in a lot of people. So with the hobby making its way to a transitional period online, being both more accessible and pissing off Wizards of the Coast, unique communities often separated by language barrier and gaming practices began to develop in their own corners of the internet. And this was early internet, before all the regulations stuff and capitalism and that bullshit. It was organic development. It wasn't controlled, so you had more individualism and more unique interpretations of these hobbies. But most importantly, this is where Japan's relationship with Call of Cthulhu drastically changed from all other countries' relationship with it. Imagine you're a teenager in the early 2000s and you've got yourself a new PC. You're a geek, you're a nerd, you like anime and video games, and on the Wild West of the internet at the time, there were fan sites and forums everywhere, as well as new video sharing sites. You might have heard from an older sibling or a friend online about this game from the 1980s, one with the kind of mystery and creativity that has since been lost as a subject of nostalgia for many people, what with its old magazines and zines practically lying about now. Box sets that probably haven't been opened in a decade. There is an enormous rise in dating sims, shoot-em-ups, and cave-developed RPGs by some single dude in his attic. There is this general air of camaraderie and mystery as to what the internet can potentially do at the moment, and you are making do with what you have found, with the various relics not yet being uploaded to this site yet, save for a handful of forums and blog posts. Until one day you log on to Nico Nico, and suddenly you see this. September 19th, 2008. At 20 past 2 in the morning, a video is uploaded called Enjoy the World of the Cthulhu Mythos with Idols. Episode 00 prequel. The first digital replay of a Call of Cthulhu game uploaded to Nico Nico Doga. But what is a replay? It is a campaign retelling, retold in a format that is more suitable for a story. These replays actually saw publication in Japan back in the 90s, and continue to be published today for both Call of Cthulhu, Dungeons & Dragons, as well as other TTRPGs. In fact, the adaptation of a TTRPG story that was originally a campaign has been a practice for over 3 decades now. How it was done on Nico Nico was it was using dating sim software and the implementation of sprites from either other games or scans and their own edits to recreate the story. In this case, it was Idolmaster. Yeah, Idolmaster. Was quite a lot in the Toho variation as well, and they used these characters to retell the stories of their campaigns. There was an explosion in these types of videos, and even though it was early internet, they got a lot of attention, raking in hundreds if not thousands of views. Long-running narratives would be made out of these, and it was during the Moe boom, so they had a plethora of cute characters to pick from to place in what horrific scenario they had in mind. A slight increase in Cthulhu-inspired mythos stories began to appear, specifically Hayore Nyarako-san, or Nyarako Crawling with Love. Smash cut to the 2010s, the game has experienced a virtual revival. All of the game's appeal that I mentioned before is taken to its full extent in Japan. While many people developed campaigns based on mystery and horror, there were just as many doing romance, tragedy, or period dramas. More and more Japan-exclusive adventures were being written by fans, third-party developers, and the company that now currently owns it, Kadokawa Corporation. The game has become beloved. If you type in any of the Cthulhu Mythos monsters into a fan art site, you'll get a bunch of works from various Japanese artists. To be clear, Japanese art sites specifically. Eventually, the game overtook sales of all other RPGs in the genre in the country. In fact, Chaos Team came out with a statement towards Dicebreaker saying that all the Japanese sales make more than the entire game's language sales worldwide. In fact, the first Japanese exclusive title that I mentioned before, Tasegara no Tenshi, now goes for roughly $500 to $600. It is one of the most expensive TTRPG items in Japan, if not the most. There are blogs full of scenario ideas, campaign retellings, and even guides on how to set up a replay and a campaign and what to do with the various monsters, like the mini guides you see for starting out with D&D. Soon there would be an emergence of actual plays, which are the real-time playthroughs of these TTRPG campaigns, on YouTube, that now rake in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views, far more than most D&D videos do. Obviously, Critical Role is the highest viewed of this genre of video, but if you type in Cthulhu Mythos TRPG, you will find hundreds of videos with millions of views, and even notifications for lives for actual plays that'll be going up in about an hour. D&D doesn't even get this kind of treatment. It's insane. This isn't even mentioning the 2019 edition, which was the translation of the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu into Japanese, which boomed in popularity during the first and second waves of the you-know-what, which is partially thanks to, I can't believe I'm about to say this, VTubers. That is right. You have to thank Nyaroko, Idolmaster, Toho, and VTubing for the continued visibility and survival of your game. That's right, all thanks to... As a side note, during my research for this, I did discover the existence of Shoggoth-Girls. They are a thing, and I have a theory about them. It's possible that they might actually be the Japanese equivalent of the I Seduced the Dragon legend in D&D, where it's a legend where you're not entirely sure who started it or if anyone actually does it, but its continued existence and implication and jokings has made people start to attempt it. While there is a Shoggoth-Girl in the Monster Girl Encyclopedia, there has actually been a light novel about a Shoggoth maid 5 years before its debut in the Monster Girl Encyclopedia. Thus, it can be theorized that the practice of wifing the Shoggoth could have been an actual thing, or at the very least a joke. Further evidence would be the spell Command Shoggoth, which puts them under your control if you have a strong enough will. They are also shapeshifters, so with enough creative mind and degeneracy in one's brain, you can see where this is going. Anyway, back to the video. Let's take a look at some of the Japan-exclusive covers for the game. The usual American style is inspired by sort of old Pulp Fiction magazines and movie posters from around the interwar period to the 50s, to kind of convey that sort of B-movie feel and the mystery, weird tales aesthetic. It works absolutely lovely for the design that they're going for. Now, this is how different the Japanese covers look. Bibliothek 13, collection of 13 scenarios for Call of Cthulhu. And you can just see the immediate difference here. This bloody red, the floating bodies in the background, and the creepy girl walking forwards with the tendrils and hairs moving in from the side. It just has this immediately strange, oppressive atmosphere. In fact, it kind of reminds me of the upcoming Silent Hill F game that's currently in development. The messy text is a common thing with these covers, which is kind of annoying, but it weirdly adds charm to it for me. I know it's a specific thing, but it's like, you're not gonna forget it. This whole cover has this sense of modernity holding in something unnatural, or something unnatural making its way into the modern world, which fits very much what it's going for. It's really refreshing just seeing Cthulhu-esque stuff in modern day instead of the 1920s where most of its stories are from. Mount Hiei Burning. I actually really like the title for this one, with the sharp strokes and the bright colors and the deep red. It reminds me a lot of like a Shin Megami Tensei game. For some reason, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne comes to mind. This is a Warring States period setting book, and I'm just like, please translate this. I want this so bad. I mostly like it because of its use of color. However, I do have to admit, it doesn't look like a Call of Cthulhu game. It looks more like a historical playing game. However, considering how it's used in Japan, that's not really much of a big difference, considering that people do use it for historical roleplay, and this is just perfect for it. I've actually only just noticed this. There is this tick spider-like creature at the upper left-hand side of the cover, which I believe is meant to be Ahort, or a spawn of Ahort, something similar, this spider-like demon from the game. But we can't really see it. It's kind of hard to identify that it's even there, whether intentional or unintentional. Someone actually published a chapter guide showing the various kinds of occupations you can play as well as jutsu techniques, including ninjutsu, martial arts, supernatural powers, and Christianity. Yeah, we all remember those famous Christian jutsus, right guys? I know Christianity has a significant place in Japanese history, but it's just, Naruto's poisoned me, I'm sorry. Cthulhu Tablet. This cover is dreamlike. There are tiny little statues of Tsutagwa leading up to this temple up a staircase. There's a monk in yellow, not sure if that's a reference to Hastur or not, but it looks really cool. And the cave itself, this enormous smiling beast, its hair flowing out into the smog surrounding it with an almost twisted, what I think is a smile. It's so strange and unnatural and just so unique. I've never seen a cover like this before. It brings to mind the Geino Yamashita-gumi album Cacophony Rhine, which has this similar demonic head opening up to the rest of the world. It evokes this feeling of strange folk tales and myths holding something darker inside, and like we're visiting it through the surrealness of our dreams. It's also kind of helpful that each of the individual scenarios are in a different time period, with a few similarities like in modern day in the 1920s. To the side, the hair is braided and it trails down. I'm just kind of curious how big this thing actually is. Ugh, and that smile, it's giving me I'm sorry John vibes, if you know what I mean. If this is Tsutagwa, it's probably the most unique version of it I've ever seen. Cthulhu 2020. This is a source book for modern day, and it looks just very odd. Like, all the others are odd and weird and strange and surreal and whatnot, but this kind of feels like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, but with the system circuit feels at the background. Yeah, it's Call of Cthulhu in the digital age. There's circuitry, there's technology now, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. I'm actually very curious as to what they've put in this one, because we of the English audience haven't actually had a, in air quotes, modern day version of the game since Call of Cthulhu Now, which was released in the 1980s. I think this is a Hound of Tinderlos, but with all the dynamic angles. It looks almost like it's chasing something and swirling through space. It's really cool. It's dynamic even though it's only a small image with a single subject. It's cool. Not what comes to mind when I think of Call of Cthulhu in the 2020s, but still a unique cover nonetheless. Here are also some covers for some replays that they published. Yeah, they published like some actual replays as well as manga of Lovecraftian stories. And of course they have an isekai for fun! In 2017, Den Feminico Gamer, a hobbyist and gaming news site, published an article detailing the appeal of Call of Cthulhu to its player base, specifically its majority female one. A TRPG festival was being held at Hotel Unoya in the city of Atami. Between the 1st and the 3rd of September, they conducted the interviews. Reading this interview article, it's like those videos you see of people going around conventions asking where you got your costumes from, what you're a fan of, but it's so personal and unique to that individual that each little article is like its own self-contained short story, if only by less than a paragraph long. The article gives each of the players they interviewed special profile pictures of sorts in these circular bubbles contained by a color and a small descriptive name underneath. A couple of the players really like the scenarios that come about when madness strikes a character. They are fans of individual monsters and gods. They pass in jokes back and forth about losing sanity. There's this one player who finds Shoggoths adorable and even says this like cute version of the horrific cry that the monster makes. There was a player who was playing as a cat in an investigation who went insane. I found 4 players with their own interpretation of the horror and their relationship towards it. Some are great with it, but some aren't, yet they found this game to be largely appealing, because it doesn't have to focus on the horror a lot of the time. The strangeness of it can go past from horror into absurdity, which can be just as fun. The article conveys this perfect, simple, fun vibe of going to a hobby store on a game day on a warm summer's morning. The people you meet and the fun interactions you can have with them. It's all part of the enjoyment of things like one-shots and campaigns that you can only really get with strangers. Gaming with friends is fun, don't get me wrong, but there's something special about when you can just click that well with a group you've never met before. And that's an event that only comes around every once in a while. If you travel for work or frequent at conventions, then you kind of understand what I mean. Those interesting characters you meet both in the game and in real life. I highly encourage you to give it a read if you can. So you want to give it a shot? I want you to jump to your browser and type in Call of Cthulhu Quick Start Rules. You click on it, jump to Chaosium's website, you'll see a download link for the PDF, click it, download it, boom, you can play right there for free. This is a Kickstarter rule set. Now you know about it. It should change your life forever if you play TTRPGs. Wizards of the Coast don't like these because they want all your money. Bullshit. Get these, it's great. It gives you a quick taster for the rule set and the vibe that they're going for, and it even comes with a free adventure for you to try out for yourself and your friends. Chaosium also has the character sheets free to download for you. Specifically, look for the autofill ones. They fill in a bunch of the stats and do the calculations for you without you needing to put in so much as the headwork. A bunch of TTRPGs have these. Look for them. Vampire the Masquerade has one. I bet no one's told you about it though. The Avatar the Last Airbender RPG has one. Yeah, Avatar the TTRPG. You didn't know that? Well, it has a quick start set. Go get it! It's free! Just type it in! Follow the character creation rules, or if you're struggling with it, there's plenty of guides online. I recommend this one, it's amazing. Then kick back, relax, put on some sick beats, and just make your character. Or just, yeah, look through the adventure. Take your time with it, you don't need to rush, the game will be waiting for you, wherever you may be. If you're feeling rushed by this video, just calm the heck down, we'll be fine. You like what you see, you want to go further, you've had a taste of that Eldritch knowledge and you want a bit more. There's the Players and Keepers Guide, available in PDF form. You don't need to buy the physical book. All this shit about the Dungeon Master's Guide, you don't need it. Most of it's online anyway. For the Keeper's Rules, you can buy it. I have the physical copy because I'm a queer, spooky, horror-obsessed nerd who hasn't shut up to his friends about this topic for almost 2 fucking years. A lot of new, young TTRPG players will only know about D&D most likely from the people who they watch online, i.e. Critical Role and the Unexpectables and Vox Machina, all of them. But there is a whole world beyond their imagination into different genres and gaming possibilities, and ones that don't take fucking forever to memorize the rules for. Now begins your journey to finding a game. You've read the stuff, you like what you see, you've seen the guides, maybe you've even seen an actual play to get a feel for how it works. Look for a Discord, there are many available. Try the Call of Cthulhu subreddit, they're very open. Still unsure of the rules? Simple, ask for a keeper to run the game and help guide you through it. Someone will likely be bringing up an adventure in the 1920s, but you don't have to do it in the 1920s. It could be modern day if that's just easier for you to do. So you've read, watched, played, maybe even bought at this point. Now you're deep in it, it's got its claws, it's got its tentacles around you. It's a sign you're actually enjoying yourself, that you actually want to do more. If you could hear yourself saying that in your mind, take it, go for it. Just be careful with your money though. The economy's pretty bad at the moment. It's hard times. Keep yourself safe. You could do all of this without having to leave your home because, well, realistically, the US and the UK and most other majority English-speaking countries don't have a big Call of Cthulhu scene, so you're more likely going to be playing it online anyway. But if you can find them in, like, you know, the real world where grass and fresh air is, you kind of, like, are a god. Please teach us your ways and how you manage to get around scheduling and, like, low serotonin. If you are insane enough to suddenly take up the mantle of Keeper, which is Call of Cthulhu's equivalent of the Dungeon Master, you can do more. At this point, you will have to actually buy the Keeper's Guide, but everything else that I've said beforehand, all this, everything like past this point, you can do for free. All you need is assistance from the actual people online to help you, and you could practically run the games for yourself. It'll be a bit tricky, but you can definitely do it. But now you can participate even more. You can host games for people if you want. Or you could just be a player looking for a very specific setting. But now you get to choose a time period, a setting. Are you a history buff? Do you know a lot about this one specific period in time that you're a bit too obsessed with? Go for it. Make that a setting. Or you could even go for another fictional setting. Maybe you've heard about Lovecraft and his very racist views. Or you're a bit iffy on horror on how it treats minorities like myself. Various groups have started to reclaim the horror genre as something unique to them. Not the racism! We have not reclaimed the racism! I repeat, the subreddit have already said that Lovecraft was a huge bigot, and a lot of the writers for this genre are. But the writers of the subreddit and the writers of the game go to great lengths to assure you and inform you of the bigotry of this man. The historical setting books will also go into detail telling you that there will be touchy subjects of them, and it's up to you whether or not you want to leave those in. Because ultimately, the degree of horror and intensity and seriousness is entirely up to you. If you want to make it safe for people to come in and express themselves without going into something a bit too triggering or personally hurtful, it's completely viable for you. In fact, it's encouraged. Worried about being lore accurate in big quotation marks about this world of cosmic horrors? Don't be! There isn't any lore. There's like a vibe and an atmosphere. As long as you hit that, you're good. The closest thing that this world has to canon lore are the stories they are from. Half the characters are actually insane, so you can run away with these ideas. As long as they are these unstoppable, horrendous monsters beyond human comprehension and concept, you're nailing it right. But even then, you don't have to make it cosmic horror. It's horror. You could do all kinds of styles with this. Folk horror, ghost stories, slashers, thrillers, tons of stuff. Not to mention mystery, the tons of variations on mystery. I mean, if you're a fan, you got free range. But the game is deadly. You want your players to be able to do long periods of roleplay with their characters. Maybe you're a bit unnerved by the lethality of the madness and the injuries. Well, yeah, we get that. We totally get that. It proves that you're an English speaker as fuck, but we get that. Try Pulp Cthulhu. It allows you to punch a deep one in the face. You can create science, mumbo-jumbo, sci-fi, pulp fiction gadgets. You can even get psychic superpowers. There's the Dreamlands, which allows you to enter in a fantasy world created from the subconsciousness of the human mind. Literally, a huge fantasy land made before Tolkien made the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He was a big director alongside Peter Jackson. But yes, longer games where your characters survive for a lot longer with more HP, totally doable. But you've heard of the mystery. You're kind of like, yeah, these old ones and cults and stuff, they're cool, but they're a bit too secretive. I want something a bit more active. Well, this is where a lot of the fictional settings come in. We're living in an internet horror age. I've already met keepers who are made worlds based on, like, the SCP Foundation, and I'm pretty sure there are many more making them based off analog horror and backroom style stuff. If anything, that might even be easier, as many of those genres are based off Lovecraft's work. Kane and Pixel's Backroom series or the Mandela catalog, just try any of these and you're good. Hell, Delta Green actually did the Men in Black versus Cosmic Horrors thing before the SCP Foundation did. So that's not even out of place. Hell, while researching for this video, I found an ad from 2019 about a guy wanting to do a game based around Madoka Magica. Contributions are welcomed. As long as they unnerve us and make us freak the fuck out, you're good. just don't be a dick. Call of Cthulhu's relationship with Japan shows something rather special about the internet and online interaction. Call of Cthulhu's relationship with Japan shows something rather special about the nature of online interaction and the growth of specific communities around a game. While most of the internet is in English, there is a good portion of it written in the many different languages of the world, many of which I'm probably never going to be able to see or even understand. Same with you watching this. But hidden in these chat forums and personal blogs is this little thing that blooms into something beautiful called perspective. It's through these mediums that a game survives, not through its sales. The private interactions that can eventually grow into a community wholly of its own, whether just between a small group of friends or perhaps hundreds of thousands of people. But it's this organic flow of a fandom and a community that creates these beautiful spaces of spins on topics you never even could have conceived of. But through such a devoted love of something that was initially niche, Japan now has this thriving fandom for the TTRPG game Call of Cthulhu. Of all things, it was that. But it's just as valid as anything that you or I are in love with. It's not just weird country doing weird things, it's a perspective, and one wholly of their own. So, you listening to this? Come on. Show us what you got.